get on the ground!
Stop! I didn't do anything!
Put your hands behind your back.
The first night I heard him breathing, I thought it was my house settling. That's what everyone tells you about old homes, that they sigh, that they shift, that wood expands and contracts like a sleeping animal. I had just moved into the narrow 2-story rental on Briar, Hollow Road. A quiet, suburban street lined with maple trees and mailboxes shaped like barns. The place had been cheap, suspiciously cheap, for the area, but I was 29, recently divorced, and desperate for something that felt like a fresh start. So when I lay in bed that first night and heard a slow, uneven inhale followed by a faint, rasping exhale drifting through the darkness, I told myself it was the pipes. I even laughed. "Relax, Claire," I whispered into the dark. "It's not a horror movie." The breathing stopped. I remember that clearly. It didn't fade. It didn't trail off. It stopped, as if something had heard me. I held my own breath, staring at the ceiling where passing. Headlights dragged pale, bands of light across the plaster. The house felt suddenly too quiet, like it was listening back. Then the refrigerator kicked on downstairs, and the spell broke. I slept eventually. I wish I hadn't. The house was built in 1948, beige siding. A narrow porch with chipped white railings. Inside, the floors creaked in polite, predictable ways, and the walls were thick real plaster and lath, not the hollow drywall of newer builds. The living room smelled faintly of dust and something older, something like trapped air that had been sealed in for decades. The landlord, Mr. Harlow, had been brief during the walkthrough. Previous tenant left in a hurry, he'd said, jangling keys. Didn't give notice. Left most of the furniture. If you want it, it's yours. Why'd they leave? I'd asked. He'd shrugged. Personal reasons. At the time, I hadn't cared. The furniture was dated but usable. A sagging couch, a heavy oak dining table, a bookshelf built directly into the wall between the living room and hallway. That was didn't know it. The second night, I heard the breathing again. This time, it came from the wall behind my bed. Slow, measured, close. I sat up, so fast my head spun. "Hello?" I called softly. Silence. Then, faintly, a scraping sound, like fingernails brushing against wood. My skin prickled. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, sweeping it across the room. The closet door was closed. The window was latched. The bedroom door stood slightly ajar, opening into a dark hallway. Nothing moved. "Old house," I muttered again. But I didn't fall asleep for hours. Over the next few weeks, small things began to shift. At first, they were easy to dismiss. A kitchen cabinet left open when I was sure I'd closed it. A glass moved from the counter to the sink. My bathroom towel slightly damp when I hadn't showered. I blamed stress. My divorce had been messy. Sleepless nights could play tricks on anyone. Then the food started disappearing. Not dramatically. Not enough to be obvious. Just less. I'd buy a loaf of bread, make 2 sandwiches during the week. And by Friday the loaf would be nearly gone. A carton of milk that felt lighter than it should. Leftover pasta reduced by a few spoonfuls. Maybe I'm stress eating, I told myself. So I started marking things. One Sunday night, I took a Sharpie and drew a thin black line across the milk carton, right at the level of the liquid. I did the same on a bottle of orange juice. The next morning, the line was lower. But enough. My stomach dropped. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the carton in my hand, trying to construct a logical explanation. Maybe I'd poured a glass, half asleep. Maybe the carton wasn't level when I marked it. I wanted to believe that. That night, I set up my old laptop on the kitchen counter and turned on the webcam recording feature. I angled it toward the refrigerator and went to bed. I didn't sleep. Every creak felt amplified. Every whisper of wind against the siding sounded like a footstep. Around to 13 a.m., I heard it again, the breathing. Louder now, closer, directly behind my head. I pressed my ear to the wall and heard something shift on the other side. Not pipes. Nod. Wait. Something with weight. I stumbled back, heart hammering. There's no space back there, I whispered. But I wasn't entirely sure. The next morning, I watched the footage. For the first hour, nothing happened. The kitchen sat still and empty, lit only by the faint glow of the laptop's screen. At 1:47 a.m., the image flickered slightly. At 1:49, the refrigerator door opened. Slowly, my throat tightened. The camera didn't capture the side of the fridge, where someone would stand. It only showed the door swinging outward, revealing the dim interior light. Then a hand reached in. A bally hand. Thin. Dirty. The nails long and uneven. I felt bile rise in my throat. The hand withdrew the milk carton. The door closed. The kitchen returned to silence. I sat frozen, staring at the paused image of that hand. It hadn't come from the hallway. It hadn't entered from any visible doorway. It had appeared from the left edge of the frame, the wall. I rewound the footage. Watched again. The refrigerator door opened from the side closest to the built-in bookshelf. The bookshelf that was attached to the wall separating the living room and hallway. I walked slowly into the living room. The bookshelf stood tall and heavy, filled with old paperbacks left by the previous tenant. It looked solid, built flush against the wall. But as I ran my fingers along the right edge, I felt something strange. A faint draft. Cool air brushing against my knuckles. I pushed gently. It didn't budge. I pushed harder. The entire bookshelf shifted. Just slightly. Enough. Behind it, I saw darkness. Anarogepi. My heart pounded in my ears. I wedged my fingers into the side and pulled with everything I had. The bookshelf scraped against the floor with a groan, revealing a hidden opening in the wall, about 2 feet wide, tall enough for a man to squeeze through. The smell hit me first. Sweat. Rot. Something human. I stumbled back. Inside the opening was a narrow crawlspace, between the walls finished, gap likely left during construction. Wooden beams. Insulation hanging in strips. A thin mattress on the floor. A plastic bag filled with empty food wrappers. Water bottles. And in the corner, a pile of my clothes. My hands began to shake. He had been living there, inside my walls, watching. For how long? The laptop footage said at least weeks. But the mattress looked worn. The trash pile was large. 3 years. That's what the police would later tell me. He'd been there for 3 years. Before me. Before the previous tenant. Before that. He'd been cycling through the walls of the house. Slipping out only when it was empty. Retreating into the hidden spaces when someone moved in. The previous tenant hadn't left for personal reasons. She'd left because she found him. But she never told anyone. I didn't call the police immediately. That's the part that still haunts me. Instead, I stood there, staring into that dark slit in my home, and whispered, "Hello?" Silence. Then, a faint exhale from inside. I screamed. A sudden movement, scrambling wood creaking. He was still in there. I ran. Out the front door, barefoot, phone in hand. I called 911 from the sidewalk, shaking so hard I could barely speak. "There's someone in my house," I gasped. He's inside the walls." The dispatcher thought I was hysterical. "I'm not crazy," I kept saying. "I have video. Please." The police arrived in 7 minutes. The longest 7 minutes of my life. They entered with guns drawn. I watched from across the street as they disappeared inside. There was shouting. "Police, come out." "Acresci." Mori shouting. Then they dragged him out. He was smaller than I expected. Gaunt. Filthy. Hair matted to his skull. His eyes. His eyes were clear. Angam, as they cuffed, he looked at me. Not angry. Not afraid. Almost disappointed. "I wasn't hurting you," he said softly. His voice was hoarse, like it hadn't been used in years. "I just needed somewhere to stay." I couldn't speak. They loaded him into the car, and I thought it was over. It wasn't. Because 3 weeks later, I heard breathing again. Cud moved. Different house. Different town. New locks. Security system. Cameras in every room. I told no one the address, except my sister. The first night, there was peaceful. The second night, at 2:13 a.m., I woke up. Because the house sighed. Then, a slow, uneven inhale, followed by a faint, rasping exhale. From the wall behind my bed. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. An unknown number. A text message. "I'm sorry I scared you." My blood turned to ice. Another message appeared. "You moved the bookshelf." I stared at the wall. The breathing grew slightly louder. Then, 3 soft knocks. Inside. I don't live in houses anymore. I live in apartments now. High-rises with concrete walls. Secure entrances. Doorman. But sometimes, laciaci night when the hums and hum of traffics, I still hear it. That slow inhale. That patient exhale. Walls are thicker than we think. And sometimes, they're not empty.